My uncle stole my late father's classic car, declaring, "I'm older, so I deserve to inherit more than you." When I confronted him, he mocked me, saying, "Possession is 9/10 of the law, good luck getting it back." His confidence crumbled when the police arrived with my title in hand, stating, "Actually, the law says otherwise, and you're under arrest for grand theft auto." My dad passed away last year. He had cancer. The slow kind. The painful kind. I was the one who took care of him during the worst months. Not my uncle. Not anyone else. Just me. I was there for the chemo appointments, the ER visits, and the nights when he couldn't sleep. My dad and I had always been close. He raised me alone after my mom left when I was 8. I grew up in San Diego, California. He worked as a mechanic for most of his life and was the kind of guy who could fix anything with an engine. But he had one real love outside of raising me, his 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS. It was a beast. Black, chrome trim, red leather interior. I used to help him polish it every Sunday morning. He told me it would be mine one day. He never said it as a maybe. It was always certain. When he passed, everything went into probate, even though he had a will. The car was listed in my name, clear and legal. I had the title, registration, everything transferred over. But my uncle, his older brother, had always hated that I was getting the car. Let's call him Rick. He's the type who shows up at family funerals like he's the one being honored. Always in some loud sports coat, talking over everyone, acting like he's the man of the family. Because he's older. He didn't take care of my dad when he was dying. Didn't even visit much. But once the funeral was over and the estate stuff started being sorted, he started circling like a vulture. At the wake, he made a toast that somehow turned into him talking about how, back in the day, he helped my dad restore the Chevelle. That was a lie. I was there every weekend for 5 years while we worked on it. Rick never lifted a finger. Anyway, a few weeks later, I went to the garage where I kept the car. It was being stored at a secure rental unit with CCTV and keypad entry. I unlocked the door and gone. The Chevelle was gone. At first, I thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I parked it somewhere else. But I checked the cameras and saw footage from 2 nights earlier. Rick. In the middle of the night. With a flatbed tow truck. He had someone help him haul the car out of there. They clipped the lock, bypassed the security, and drove off like it was some heist movie. I lost it. Called him immediately. Me. You stole my dad's car. Rick. That car belongs to the family. I'm older. I deserve more than you. Me. That's not how it works. The title is in my name. It's theft. Rick, literally laughing. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Good luck getting it back. He hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I drove straight to the San Diego PD and filed a report. I showed them the title, the registration, the security footage, the lease agreement for the garage. I had everything. The cop didn't even blink. Officer, you're saying your uncle stole your car and admitted it? Me. Yeah. It's all on camera, and I have texts. He towed it out like it was his. Officer. That's grand theft auto. They took it seriously. They pulled the footage, got a warrant, and traced the tow truck company. It turns out Rick had paid in cash, under his own name, and had it towed to his house in Riverside, about 90 minutes away. That's where it gets even more ridiculous. When the cops got there, he had already listed the car for sale. On Facebook Marketplace. For $85,000. That car was priceless to me. And this guy was trying to flip it like some Craigslist junk. Police called me back to confirm ownership again. I drove up to Riverside to be there when they served the warrant. I stayed across the street and watched it all go down. Rick tried to play dumb at first. Said it was his brother's car. And they were close, so it was a gift. Cops didn't buy it for a second. Then he tried to argue it was part of inheritance. Again, the title and my name shut that down quick. Officer. Actually, the law says otherwise, and you're under arrest for grand theft auto. The look on his face when the cuffs went on. Worth every ounce of stress. He started yelling about family betrayal, and how this isn't what your father would have wanted. The officer just said, "Your brother clearly did want this. He made it legal." They towed the car back to me that same night. It had a few new scratches on it. Nothing I couldn't fix. But I couldn't believe he tried to sell it. My father's car. The car I helped rebuild with my own hands. My aunt, Rick's wife, called me a week later crying, begging me to drop the charges. She said, "He didn't mean it. He was just emotional." I said, "Then he shouldn't have hired a tow truck and listed it online for 85 grand. Rick's being charged. The case is still pending, but it's looking bad for him. Grand theft auto isn't a slap on the wrist. And since he used tools to break in and bypass security, they added breaking and entering to the list. I'm not out for blood, but I'm also not letting this slide. He crossed a line. Family or not. And honestly, this whole thing taught me that some people will show you who they are the moment something valuable is involved. And you better believe them when they do." After Rick was arrested, word spread fast in the family. You'd think I was the one who committed the crime, the way some of them turned on me. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. One of them, Danny, called me to say I should have handled it quietly, because blood is thicker than water. I asked him if he'd let someone steal from him and sell something that meant everything to him. He went quiet. Then hung up. My grandmother called too. She's in her 80s. Still sharp, but easily influenced. She said Rick told her I forged the title. That I used my dad's illness to manipulate him into signing everything over. That hit me like a punch to the chest. I took care of my dad every day until the end. If anything, I deserved more than just the car. But I never wanted anything else. I drove over to her house with every document. The will. The title. The transfer papers. I sat with her and went through it page by page. Her hands shook as she read. She didn't apologize, but I could tell she knew the truth now. Then things got worse. 2 weeks later, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was stolen except one thing, the spare key to the garage where I now kept the Chevelle. They didn't even touch my laptop or TV. Just the key. No forced entry. I live in a secure building in Mission Valley. Whoever did it either picked the lock or had a key. My gut said Rick had someone do it. Maybe even Danny. I moved the car the next morning. I didn't even tell my closest friends where. Got a new lock. New location. Hidden cameras. I even installed a GPS tracker under the car. I wasn't taking any more chances. A few days after that, I saw Rick's car parked down the block from my building. I knew it was his, old Dodge Ram with a dent in the back and a faded Marine Corps bumper sticker. He sat there for hours. Didn't even try to hide it. Just sat there with the engine running, windows up. Watching. I called the police. They said unless he made a threat or trespassed, there wasn't much they could do. I felt trapped in my own place. So I started documenting everything. Every car that followed me. Every text from random numbers calling me names or threatening me. I got a restraining order filed. My lawyer said it would help if this went to trial. Then came the real twist. One night I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, nervous, rushed. She said her name was Angela, and she worked at the same auto body shop Rick used sometimes in Riverside. She said she didn't want to get involved, but she saw something she thought I should know. Turns out, after Rick stole the Chevelle, he tried to alter the VIN. That's right. He filed down the original number on the dash and tried to replace it with a different plate, one pulled from a junked Malibu that looked similar. That's federal stuff. Not just grand theft anymore. That's VIN tampering. Felony level. Angela said Rick paid a guy under the table to do it, but the guy got spooked when he found out the car was reported stolen. He didn't finish the job. Rick freaked out and parked the car at his cousin's lot temporarily, before bringing it back home. She overheard all this while cleaning up one night. Didn't say a word until now. I asked her if she'd be willing to talk to the police. She hesitated. Said she didn't want to get involved. I gave her my lawyer's number and said, "If you change your mind, just know you could help make sure he doesn't do this to anyone else." 2 days later, she called my lawyer and gave a statement. Signed and everything. That was the nail in the coffin. But Rick didn't go down easy. He started spreading rumors that I was mentally unstable. That I was spiraling after my dad died. That I made up the whole thing because I couldn't handle grief. I lost 2 job opportunities because someone anonymously called my references and said I was involved in legal issues. I knew it was Rick. I just couldn't prove it. And then one morning, I woke up to find a brick through the window of my garage. Not the one with the car. A different one I use for tools and storage. Brick had a note tied to it. "Let it go before you regret it." I handed it to the police. They bagged it as evidence, but again, no prints, no camera footage. Just threats. My lawyer filed an emergency motion to bring it into the court proceedings. Rick was still out on bail. But barely. The judge was getting tired of the games. Last I heard, they were adding new charges. And I had more people reaching out, people Rick had screwed over before. Old business partners, a former friend who said Rick once tried to forge paperwork to steal a boat from his dad's estate. Same playbook. Different victim. This guy wasn't just greedy. He was dangerous. And I wasn't backing down. A few weeks after the restraining order went through, things seemed quiet. Too quiet. I wasn't sleeping well, always on edge. I kept expecting Rick to pull something else, and eventually he did. But not in the way I thought. One morning, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from an attorney I didn't recognize. The letter said I was being sued by Rick. He filed a civil suit claiming emotional distress, slander, and, get this, wrongful seizure of property. He was trying to paint me as someone who manipulated the legal system to rob an elderly veteran of his rightful inheritance. He included some twisted evidence, like photos of the car in his driveway, screenshots of the Facebook ad he tried to delete, and even excerpts of our text messages. But only the parts that made me sound aggressive, not the part where he literally admitted taking the car. My lawyer almost laughed when she read it. But it wasn't funny. If anything, it meant the nightmare wasn't close to over. I had to take time off work to prepare for the case. Again. More legal fees. More paperwork. The guy was trying to bury me in court to wear me down. And for a moment, I felt like it was working. Until someone else showed up out of nowhere. Her name was Maria. She was in her mid-40s, kind of quiet but direct. She asked if she could talk to me in person, said it was about Rick. I was suspicious, but we met in a Starbucks on Claremont Mesa Boulevard, where it was public. She said, "I used to be married to him." I didn't know what to say. She continued, "He did the same thing to my father." Turns out, back in the early 2000s, Maria's dad had a 1968 Camaro. He was terminally ill. Rick swooped in near the end, claimed to help with the estate, and somehow ended up with the car. Claimed it was a gift. Said there was no paperwork because it was a handshake deal. Her dad had early dementia at the time, and Rick convinced Maria's family to back off. He sold that car 2 weeks after the funeral. She hadn't heard from him in years, until she saw my story floating around online. I hadn't posted it, but someone in the family had clearly leaked it, maybe to shame me. Instead, it brought allies. She agreed to give a sworn statement. Said she'd testify if it came to that. Now Rick wasn't just a thief. He had a history. And if the court saw a pattern? That changed everything. But Rick didn't stop. A month before the trial date, my dog went missing. He's a golden retriever named Max. I've had him since college. My neighbor told me a guy in a hoodie was seen near my building gate earlier that day, trying to coax Max with a treat during our usual walk window. I checked my security cam footage, fuzzy image, but it looked like Rick. Same build. Same walk. Couldn't prove it. 2 days later, Max came back. Someone left him in the front lobby with a note attached to his collar. Consider this a warning. That was it. I filed another police report. My lawyer pushed for emergency protection again. The judge approved, and Rick got hit with another restraining order, this time with stronger conditions. GPS monitoring. 0 contact. It got real quiet after that. Then the real bomb dropped. Rick's own son, Tyler, reached out to me. I'd met him once as a kid, maybe when I was 10. He was estranged from Rick. Lived in Oregon now. Said he'd been reading everything online and wanted to help. Apparently, Rick had done something similar to him, too. Took money from a college fund their grandfather set up, and used it to pay off a failing business loan. Lied for years about what happened. Tyler only found out when he went to apply for financial aid and the account was empty. He never forgave him. But Tyler had something big: emails. Old emails Rick sent to him and his mother, bragging about getting what's owed. Saying things like, "That car should have been mine all along." And, "The kid doesn't even understand what he's sitting on." One even said, "By the time this is over, I'll have the car and the sympathy." He forwarded them all to my lawyer. We brought them to the court as part of our defense, and to support the criminal case still pending. Prosecutors added evidence of premeditation and pattern of behavior to their filings. But here's where it got strange again. Rick disappeared. I don't mean he skipped court, he literally vanished. Missed his check-ins. GPS ankle monitor went offline. Police showed up to his house, empty. He cleared out. No signs of forced exit. No note. Just gone. For 3 weeks, nobody knew where he was. Cops issued a warrant. I slept with one eye open, because I knew if he was desperate enough, he'd come back for the car, or worse. Then, in late January, police found him. In Arizona. Trying to cross the border. With a different stolen car. He had shaved his beard, cut his hair, and was using a fake name. They got him at a checkpoint near Yuma. Claimed he was headed for a vacation. They ran the plates on the SUV he was in, reported stolen from a dealership in Riverside a week prior. Now he's facing charges in 2 states. At this point, I don't even know what Rick was thinking. Maybe he believed he was untouchable. Maybe he thought if he left California, it would all disappear. But what I do know? He underestimated everyone around him. Me. Maria. Tyler. Angela. All the people he used and discarded over the years. We came together, not out of hate, but because we were sick of his lies. The trial is coming up soon. I have the car. I have the title. I have the evidence. The trial date came fast. Rick was extradited back to California. He looked rough, thinner, pale, like all the running had finally worn him down. His lawyer tried to delay, said he was mentally unfit. But the judge wasn't buying it. They had too much on him. Then tampering. Grand theft auto. Breaking and entering. Fraud. Restraining order violations. And now, fleeing the state. The courtroom was packed the first day. My lawyer told me not to look at him, but I did anyway. He wouldn't meet my eyes. They went through everything: surveillance footage, signed title, witness statements from Maria, Angela, Tyler. Every person he screwed over lined up like a row of ghosts from his past. It wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about how he had made a life out of taking from people he claimed to love. I testified too. I kept it simple. Told them how I took care of my dad. How we built the Chevelle together. How my uncle waited until my father was dead to make his move. How he laughed in my face and said, "Possession is 9/10 of the law." The prosecutor repeated that line to the jury. They didn't forget it. Rick's defense team had nothing. They tried to say it was a family dispute. That it got blown out of proportion. They played the veteran card, said he was stressed, grieving, confused. The judge stopped them cold. She said, "You don't steal a car, fake a VIN, threaten witnesses, run from court, and call it confusion." Rick was found guilty on all charges. Every single one. The sentence was heavy. 8 years in prison. No parole for at least 5. Fines. Restitution. And the kicker? The judge ordered that Rick could never claim ownership or financial interest in any part of my father's estate again. Not a dime. Not a picture. Not a keepsake. Nothing. I thought that would feel like justice. And in a way it did. But here's the part one didn't see coming. A few weeks later, I got a call from Tyler. He'd been going through Rick's old things, stuff the state let him collect as the only legal next of kin. He found a box full of old letters. Not from Rick. From my dad. Turns out, my dad had written Rick months before he died. Trying to make peace. Said he wished things had been better between them. Said he hoped one day Rick would be a decent uncle to me. My dad never told me about those letters. He probably thought Rick would never read them. He was probably right. But still, reading them? It hit me. My dad tried. Even when he was sick. Even when Rick didn't deserve it. And here's where I made my mistake. I let the hate eat away at me. After the car was stolen, after the break-ins, after the threats, I stopped being me. I obsessed over making Rick pay. I skipped birthdays. Missed out on friends getting married. I even nearly lost my job because I was so caught up in chasing every shred of revenge. I thought if I just won in court, it would fix everything. But it didn't. The night after the sentencing, I sat in the garage with the Chevelle. Same red leather seats. Same polished chrome. I turned on the engine. That rumble that always used to make me smile, it sounded hollow. Like a memory stretched too thin. I realized I wasn't holding on to the car anymore. I was holding on to grief. And anger. And fear. The Chevelle had become a symbol of what I lost. But it wasn't going to bring my dad back. It wasn't going to undo the betrayal. So I did something most people wouldn't. I put the car up on display. Not for sale. Not to show off. I donated it to the San Diego Automotive Museum. With a plaque that said, "In memory of Daniel Ruiz, mechanic father and the man who taught me what real value is. This car was built by his hands and stolen by greed, but it never lost its soul." It sits there now, roped off, shining under museum lights. People come by and take pictures. They don't know the story, but they stop. They admire it. And maybe that's enough. As for Rick? He sends letters from prison. I don't read them. I keep them in a drawer unopened. Maybe one day I'll burn them. Maybe not. I still keep Max close. He doesn't care about old grudges or family fights. He just wants me to throw the ball and be there. I guess that's what my dad would have wanted too. So yeah? Rick thought he'd win because he was older. Because he was louder. Because he thought he could twist the truth. But in the end, all he did was chain himself to his own lies. And I drove away free.